In this video, I'm going to be showing you how I take this propagated blackberry plant, repot it into a 15-gallon grow bag, and I'll tell you why I'm doing it. You're watching my Aussie Gardening Kitchen. My name's Daz, and thanks so much for being here. All right, so what I'm working with today is this awesome specimen here. This is a blackberry cutting that I've done myself. I propagated this for my own garden. And if you want to see how easy it is to propagate blackberries and get so many blackberries for free, stick around to the end of the video because I will give you a link to some other videos where I propagate blackberries and show you just how easy it is. So what I'll be doing today is I'm going to be planting this guy into a 15-gallon grow bag. Now, the reason I've gone for the 15-gallon grow bag is because there's going to be plenty of room for the roots because it is a container. So once they hit their limit in the container, they can't go anywhere else. So I've got a nice big 15-gallon grow bag here full of soil. Now, the soil here that I'm using is pretty much a mix of my own compost that I make here, a bit of soil from the dirt in my backyard, and then I've got a few other things, scrapings of just some organic matter that I've had lying around, and I've blended it all together. There's a bit of slow release fertilizer in there as well. Not too much because the plant's young, so I don't want to go burning the roots, but just enough to get it started. So obviously the first thing to do is to get this guy out of the pot. So I'll just get rid of this little bit of sugarcane mulch. Put that behind me. And I've already taken this from the pot to have a look at the roots, so it's going to be easy to take out. And there we go. Now, as you can see here, the root growth on this is just amazing. And this here has got to be, I would say, 6 months old. It's crazy. So when I took it out of the pot the other day just to check it and saw this, I knew it was time to get it into a bigger pot. Now, because the roots are so vigorous and really compacted here, I am going to loosen them up. So I'll just get my fingers into the bottom and I'm just going to peel like this to pull the roots away from the middle, just to loosen them up on the bottom. And then with my palm on the side, I'm just going to pull the roots outwards, because when I put them into this big pot, I want the roots to spread out like this, not stay in a ball. So I'm just going to spread them out like so and just give them a start. So when I place it into the soil, they'll be spread out nicely. So I'll just dig a hole in the middle here, like so. And what I'm doing is I'm just looking to make sure that the base of the plant is going to be even with the surface, no lower, no higher, like so. Now, I'm not worried about direction at the moment because it's a round grow pot and I can obviously turn, or grow bag, and I can turn the bag whatever way I like. That's one great thing about these grow bags, is that they're so portable. Now, being a 15-gallon grow pot, they're quite big. So I am going to have to get my son to help me lift this off this table and then put it in its position. And then because it's such a big one, it's pretty much going to stay where it stays. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that, and I'm pretty happy with those roots being spread out like I did. So now it's just the backfill. Really easy process. And that is pretty much all I'm going to do there as far as the planting goes. Now, this blackberry here is a Chester variety, which is a thornless variety, which is fantastic if you want them in your garden in the ground, because they're not invasive like the wild variety. So with these Chester ones, for example, I've got them in my yard already, and they pretty much stay to the immediate area where they are and shoot up new canes in that immediate area. They don't really reach out and spread and go all over the place like, say, a raspberry or a wild blackberry would. So I really like this variety, and it's the one I stick to. And obviously, being thornless, you can't go wrong without thorns. So yeah, a thornless variety called Chester. Now, in regards to when to do this, it's the middle of winter here in Australia. Now, the reason I'm doing it now in the middle of winter is because the plants are pretty much dormant. They're having a good old rest. So I'm able to take them out of the pots, play with the roots, tease the roots a bit, transplant them, and they're not really going to suffer from a shock from being transplanted or anything like that. And then spring comes along and they have a good old wake up and a bit of a stretch and start growing, and summer comes along and they're really going fine in summer. So Yeah, I really like to do this part here in winter if I can. And I've pretty much done that with all the other ones in my yard, and they're looking fantastic. And when spring and summer comes, they really kick off and they're doing quite well. Now, with fertilizing, you have a couple of options. You can actually buy a berry specific fertilizer. That's berry, not very with a V, berry with a B. And that will do your strawberries and raspberries and obviously blackberries. Or you can get a general purpose fertilizer as well and use that. I like to use fish emulsion, watered down fish emulsion. And when it comes to my fertilizing routine with, say, the blackberries, and this one in particular, what will happen is all my blackberries, I will fertilize them at the start of spring when they're waking up, give them a good old deep soak and a nice good fertilizing, both in the roots and on the foliage. Just watching out if you're fertilizing during the day on the foliage, foliar spraying, that the sun's not too high and hot, because you don't want to go burning the leaves with that fertilizer. But anyway, as I said, start of spring, give them a good old dose. And then when they're actually fruiting, I like to give them a dose of fertilizer maybe every week to 2 weeks while they're fruiting, just to encourage nice big plump growth on the fruit or the berries on the blackberries themselves. Now, why am I putting this into a grow bag? Well, quite simply, it's because this one here is going to be going into my outdoor entertaining area here. And what's going to happen is that my son will come and help me lift it because it's quite heavy, and we'll put it in its final spot and it will stay in here. And it's just one where we can come outside when the time's right and just pick berries just because we can and eat them fresh off the canes here, which is going to be fantastic. Now, all my other ones I do have planted out in organised garden beds, both in the orchard and in my yard, and they're quite good. But it's good just to come out to the back door, to this area here. As you can see, I've got lettuce growing and chili peppers and all sorts of stuff out here where I can just open the back door and pick what I want, and it's fantastic. Just love it. Now, something I'm going to do here, which you don't have to do, is that I'm just going to dig down with my fingers, like so, down like this, and make a hole. And then I've got a bit of poly pipe, and I'm just going to stick that down like so, and then fill that back in again. And then on the other side, again, with my fingers, I'm just going to dig down beside the plant, beside the roots, dig in deep, grab the poly pipe, stick it in again, push it in, cover it back up. So what I'm doing here is when I water the plant, it's going to get water, but when it comes to summer, I have some really extremely hot summers here in Australia. And with a grow bag, they can dry out quite quickly. So with these are just where when I water, I can put a bit of water into the poly pipes here, and they'll just get a bit more water down near the roots and make sure that water is getting down underneath the plant and around the root system. Now, speaking of watering, these thornless blackberries are pretty good with water. Unlike a raspberry that really you have to watch the drainage because of root rot and things like that, these guys seem to do really well with a good watering, and in fact they like a good soaking, especially in the hot weather. They don't like competition from grass and weeds. One thing I've discovered with these thornless blackberries is they do really well in frost. Now, as I said earlier, I'm in the middle of winter here in Australia, and I've had about 2 weeks straight of frosts. I think -4 to -1 degrees Celsius. Fahrenheit, I think you're looking at about mid-20s Fahrenheit, and it gets quite cold. Things get covered in ice. But I'm finding that these thornless blackberries, they just laugh at the frost. They don't worry about it, whereas other plants are quite affected. In fact, you can see that I forgot to cover some of my chili peppers just 2 nights ago, and the chili peppers really got burnt by the frost. But that's fine, because I'm actually going to be cutting these back in the next week or so in preparation for spring. But yeah, these thornless blackberries, they love the heat, but keep the water up to them. And with the frost does not seem to be an issue with them, which I'm really happy about. So as always, I have to mulch. I always recommend mulching. And of course, I love sugarcane mulch. Now, sugarcane mulch, the main reason is it's going to keep the moisture in. It's going to suppress any weeds and things like that. It also breaks down over time, becomes organic matter for the soil. And also, in this case here, this is a byproduct of the sugarcane industry here in Australia, and it's helping the farmers get a little bit of extra money by selling this sugarcane mulch as a byproduct of their processing. So yeah, it's good stuff overall, and you can't go wrong. And I just like now, like when I put it down, you can smell that sweet sugary smell from the sugarcane as you're placing it into the container. Now, as you can see, with these canes that have come up, they're looking quite good. And there's some other ones here. They're going to pop up eventually. And there's even a few more that I can see that are already starting to bend through the soil. So hopefully this guy's going to do quite well in its new home. Now, as you can see, this one here, this cane's quite long. So what I'm doing is, with my blackberry canes, I like to let them grow to about 4 to 5 feet. And then when they get to about that size, I cut them off at the top here. Now what happens is that's going to stop the growth up here from going up, and it will force growth to start coming out the sides, which is called lateral growth. And then what happens there is, with those side shoots, because you've now got more branches coming off this cane, I think I called it a vine, it's a cane. Now you've got those branches coming off the cane, that's going to be more opportunities for fruit to grow. So that's going to get your plant to give you more berries, rather than just having this one enormous cane that just keeps on going on and on. Cut it off and get that side shoot happening. And yeah, hopefully you'll get a lot more berries out of your canes because you've got that extra growth. All right, so all I've got to do now is give it a nice watering in. As I said earlier, with my soil, it's already prepared with organic matter and slow release fertilizer. So I'm not going to be adding a fertilizer now, but what I am going to do is, when I water this in, I'm going to water it in with some fish emulsion, but a very weak dosage of fish emulsion, just to give it a little bit of a kick, a little bit of a head start, to get in there and soak into the soil. Hopefully the roots and the plant will appreciate it, and come spring, it'll kick on, and I'll be showing you in a future video how I'm picking beautiful blackberries out of this nice big grow bag here. Okay, so I'm clearly not in my garden. It's now hours later, and I'm editing the video, and one whole section has not recorded because I forgot to push record on the camera. So what I wanted to say was, what I'm going to do is get 2 wooden stakes and pop them in each side of the barrel, and then put wire in between. And that's just going to be a form of a trellis, so the canes can actually be guided up and I guess rest on the trellis. And then that way, as they're growing and fruiting, they'll be upright and supported. And yeah, good times ahead with picking berries. The second thing I wanted to point out is that blackberries for fruit on a 2-year-old cane called a floricane. Now what happens is they'll put out a cane in the first year and it'll be green. That's called a promocane or a primocane, however you want to pronounce it. And that just grows. Now in the second year, that cane will turn a bit dark, and that produces the berries and the flowers that turn into berries. And that's called a floricane. And that's where you get your fruit. So yeah, just to remember, blackberries will fruit on a second year cane, not the first year cane. Now, I do believe there's a university in the United States of America that was working on a variety of blackberry that will fruit on the first year. But as a general rule, blackberries will always fruit on the second year cane. And just one last tip is that once that cane provides fruit and you've picked the fruit, the cane is not needed anymore. It's done its job and given you fruit. So you can actually cut that off at the base down at the ground and make room for airflow and room for new canes that come up. And then, of course, when those new canes come up, they will then be fruiting canes the following year. If you click on this video here right now, it's going to take you to my Propagating Blackberries video. I've actually got 2 videos now on propagating blackberries. One of them is an updated video, and I'm going to show you in that video, or both of those videos, how easy it is to propagate blackberries and get free blackberry plants. Thanks very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.